bombing Port Stanley Airport. But first, that runway was hit by one of 21 bombs from a lone Vulcan bomber, flying from Ascension and being refueled 7 times on the way.
Good. Come left. Drive it in. Move it in. It's nice.
It involved coordinating a fleet of 9 Victor air tankers to refuel themselves, as well as the V-Force bomber. Operation Black Buck 1 was designed to prevent the airfield being used by Argentina's high-performance jets, confining them to mainland bases and severely limiting their effectiveness. Soon after the Vulcan turned north, the air controller on Hermes cleared his Harriers for takeoff. At the time, the number involved was kept secret, but it's now known that the raid was carried out by 9 Harriers, 4 from Hermes and 5 from Invincible. "160 miles further east, still dawn in Port Stanley. The Argentinian invaders had remained undisturbed here for 4 weeks. Then the Harriers swooped in. In classic figure-of-8 formation, they evaded anti-aircraft measures with surprise and speed. The whole raid lasted just over a minute, but there would be 500 more. They were too low to cause serious damage to the runway, but a fuel dump was set on fire and some buildings were damaged. The Sea Harriers returned virtually unscathed and were landed quickly, being short of fuel. In 2 other operations the same day, Sea Harriers had also attacked Goose Green, destroying 5 Argentinian Pucarás. Later that day, 3 task groups of the Argentinian Navy were detected mounting an apparent pincer attack on the British battle group. The biggest threat was their flagship, the aircraft carrier 25 de Mayo, with its 8 Skyhawk fighter bombers. In the event, these jets were prevented from taking off by unsuitable weather. But the force also included 2 T-42 destroyers, sister ships to 3 in the British task group and armed with Exocet missiles. These were moving in 2 formations from the north. To the south, the nuclear-powered submarine HMS Conqueror had detected the 3rd group led by the old cruiser Belgrano. The British had already warned that they would sink any Argentinian warship deemed a threat, and reasoned that this might prevent their navy entering combat. 2 Mark 8 torpedoes were fired. The Belgrano sank in 45 minutes with the loss of 368 lives, but the rest of the Argentinian Navy took no further part. Its Skyhawks transferred to shore to fight at ranges that put them at a disadvantage. Conqueror skipper Commander Christopher Reeford Brown explained his action.
She was a threat to the task force. She'd been steaming towards them, and I'd been watching her for a few hours beforehand, and under direct orders I went in and attacked her. I think by doing so, although there was obviously loss of life on her, which I regret, I certainly saved considerable loss of life from the British task force.
May the 2nd, HMS Sheffield on the horizon and on fire, hit by an Exocet missile. Launched by air 20 miles away, it took 2 minutes flying at the speed of sound. 24 men were injured and 20 died. most casualties caused by fire from unspent rocket fuel. The human cost was the result of economies. These T-42s had been shortened to save money, leaving no space for the sophisticated Seawolf missile system. It had therefore proved vulnerable to air attack, despite being specifically designed for anti-aircraft picket duty. May the 21st, 7 weeks after the original Argentinian invasion, commandos of 3 Brigade began landing at San Carlos. They were unopposed. The Argentinians had been convinced Britain would land close to the capital, Port Stanley, as they had done. And as men and material continued to pour onto the beaches, the Argentinians were encouraged to believe this by a series of diversionary raids. In the anchorage itself, there was little room for naval escorts. Most remained out in Falklands Sound as the May the 21st gun line to protect the landings against air raids. Canberra would take all day to disembark her Royal Marine Commandos. Giant Mexifloats brought in heavy equipment. Wessex and Sea King helicopters would lift over 400 tons of guns and stores before the end of the day. Ashore, men dug into the soft peat. This would be home for a week, and wet trenches would cause great discomfort. Combat engineered tanks carved out strong points, while troops settled in quietly, marveling at the lack of opposition. It was to come from the air. Argentinian Skyhawks spearheaded mass strikes on the forces now assembled in San Carlos water. On Hermes, 130 miles from the beachhead, Harriers prepared to intercept. Despite only having 20 minutes on combat air patrol, the Harrier was responsible for downing 23 Argentinian aircraft, mainly with Sidewinder missiles. Ground defense Rapier missiles picked up the action.
There's an air battle going on to the north. Air battle to the north.
Second raid at 50 miles west. I say again, the first raid at 40 miles west. The second raid at 50 miles west. Out.
2 Skyhawks swoop over the beachhead, the first of 5 hours of attacks by 60 aircraft. Almost always they came in low and fast, but this often prevented their British-made Mark 17 bombs from exploding. The anchorage had been chosen so that Argentinian aircraft would have difficulty lining up on individual ships. Canberra's near misses and those of other ferries speeded up offloading of troops so that civilian vessels could rejoin the carrier group, allowing more warships in to defend the landings. The Argentinians lost 13 aircraft during these raids. In the coming week, 130 further sorties would be launched by the Argentinians. A near miss for HMS Yarmouth. She was one of the few gunline ships to emerge unscathed from Bomb Alley. HMS Antelope was hit on May the 23rd. Attacked by 6 Skyhawks, one of 12 bombs bounced off the sea, holding the ship but failing to explode. But it did explode during defusing, causing a fire. It took 2 hours to remove the crew, then the Seacat magazine exploded. Antelope's destruction again emphasized weaknesses due to cost saving. These Type 21s were originally conceived as low-performance ships for foreign fleets like Iran's, with a widespread use of plastics that aided the spread of fire. Another lesson was the urgent need for an integrated long and short-range air and missile defence to combat saturation air attacks. And mass Argentinian air attacks continued. A Sea Dart missile hunts its prey before another attack homes in. Reconnaissance helicopters shelter from attack. As the escorts hit back, many ships were lucky to be hit by bombs which did not explode. The commando carrier Sir Lancelot was one, towed to safe anchorage for the bomb to be defused. News of mounting ship losses sharply increased political pressure for an early breakout on land. First, instead of using helicopters as the Argentinians expected, British troops walked to Port Stanley along 3 arduous overland routes. Second, 2 Paras swooped on the important Argentinian base at Goose Green, sparking progress that would lead to tragedy at Fitzroy. Goose Green was a turning point. The 6-phase British assault quickly overran outlying Argentinian positions, but faltered at their main defence line. 2 Paras' commander was killed at Darwin Hill. Then the Argentinians were outflanked at Boca House. 2 Paras' momentum then took them to the airfield as Argentinian reinforcements arrived, but after a fierce firefight, 2 Para outflanked them. The battle lasted 15 hours, night and day, because SAS observers had been unable to assess the strength of Argentinian defences. The debris of the first land action, the only battle to spill over into daylight hours, with the disadvantage of fighting on the open Falklands terrain. Good infantry work and handling of weapons, without much outside support, had defeated a well-defended position. Yet despite the ferocity of the encounter, only 72 died, 55 Argentinians and 17 British. Bad weather prevented airstrikes until late in the battle. When they did come, Argentinian resistance crumbled fast. Their strong points fell because they'd been badly planned and were unable to afford themselves mutual protection. Only the final surrender revealed just how outnumbered the British forces had been. Over 1,500 Argentinians were taken prisoner, 3 times as many as expected. They didn't include their commander. He telephoned his orders from a safe house in Stanley. The presence of Pucará ground attack planes had discouraged the tactic of a helicopter-borne assault. They had also been used to drop napalm, a futile weapon in open territory. To the north, 4-5 Commando had begun the long trek into the mountains overlooking Port Stanley. Loss of helicopter transports when the Atlantic conveyor was sunk made